Until recently, I lived with my parents in a private house not far from the city. They were always strict and had difficult personalities, so we almost never had guests in our house. The only one of my friends they could get along with, even a little, was Lyoka. I had known him since first grade, and probably he was the only one I could trust in a tough situation. Unlike my parents, who found it easier to scold me for my mistakes than to teach me how not to make them, Lyoka was always ready to help and give advice. He had way more life experience than I did. He grew up without a father. He started working at 14 and still managed to hang out with girls. Of course, I envied him, but not in a bad way. If anything, I was happy for his success in all areas of life. He was unlucky with one. Mother was an alcoholic. She drank half of the alimony, and with the other half she bought food for Lisha. But still, he had something that I didn't have as a child. Freedom. A year after he came of age, Esichi was gone. That's why the apartment went to Leka. A week ago, he came to visit me in the evening. My parents went to the theater, so we had the house to ourselves for the next 3 hours. We didn't even think about throwing any parties. We knew how that could turn out. There was no point in having them at Leka's apartment either. Despite my age, 19, my father was absolutely against his son spending the night anywhere but home. So my friend's idea to buy me a cheap apartment on the outskirts of the city sounded really good to me. My parents were generous with my allowance, and I knew how to save, putting most of it aside for a better time. I said, I doubt I'll be able to buy a decent place with that. You will, Leka smiled. Not just a decent one, but a brand new one, in the new buildings. That's funny. My voice sounded upset. I'm serious, Leka said firmly. I've already got it all figured out. Our neighbor did exactly that not long ago. Now he lives there and couldn't be happier. Your money is more than enough for a little apartment in an old 5-story building on the outskirts. It was built back in Soviet times. The builders did a poor job leveling the foundation, and a crack formed along the wall. And then, the heating broke down, and the place is full of mold. The building was declared unsafe. They're preparing to demolish it, and the residents will be moved into new buildings. So you're suggesting I live in a dump that could collapse on my head at any moment? I asked, clearly annoyed. Oh, give it a rest. Leshka cut me off. You'll only have to live there for less than a month. It won't have time to collapse, but you'll definitely get relocated. You get a free 2-room apartment in a new building. How's that for motivation? I told him I'd think about it and give him my answer. Tomorrow, during the day. I needed to discuss everything with my parents and mentally prepare myself for the purchase that they agreed. The conversation was a long one. I laid out a ton of arguments in favor of buying and explained the plan to Leka several times. The plan. After quite a while, my mom finally supported my idea, and then my dad did too. Although, more likely, he just supported her so I'd finally leave them alone. But I didn't care. I was happy, and the next day I went to see Leka. He showed me a sales that he found online a few days ago. They were asking a little less than the amount I had saved up. The seller turned out to be a reasonable young guy, a bit older than Leka and me. He'd inherited the apartment from a grandmother he never even knew, so he didn't have any sentimental attachment to the place and put it up for sale the day after he got the inheritance. The apartment was on the 4th floor. The metal door stood out against the battered and graffiti-covered walls, but what was behind it wasn't much of an improvement. It smelled like the neighborhood cats had spent their best years here, and in some places the wallpaper was peeling off. Instead of a chandelier in the hallway, there was just a single dim bulb. The kitchen window was cracked in the lower corner. Luckily, it was summer, so spending 2 weeks here didn't mean freezing to death. The big room had a door to the balcony, an old TV, and the couch where the old lady had died. We immediately folded it up and covered it with a sheet. We weren't especially superstitious, but we didn't really want to sit there, on the spot where someone had once died. In the second room there was a wardrobe, a bed, and a nightstand. "Well, you can live here," Lyoka smiled. "Maybe I could stay at your place?" I asked. "After all, the apartment is still registered to me, so they'll move me out no matter what." "It's just that." Lyoka hesitated. "I don't live alone. Remember Liza from the parallel class?" Everything became clear. "Looks like I'll have to live here. At least this place has all the amenities. And as for the outside, the world outside is reliably kept at bay by a steel door, and my conscience wouldn't let me go spend the night at my parents' place. Besides, I really didn't want to see the look on my father's face when he realized how helpless and unprepared his son was for independent life. By evening, we had moved my things from my parents' place, and Lyoka went home. For dinner, all I had was tap water, so I decided to go to the store. The 5-story building was set a bit apart from the other houses. Because of that, getting to the store took a fair amount of time. By the time I got back, it was dark outside and the streetlights were on. Near my entrance, I noticed the silhouette. Hesitating a little, I decided to approach anyway. "Who are you?" I asked the silhouette in a woman's voice. "I live here," I replied, turning away from the entrance door. The silhouette stubbed out her cigarette and came closer to me. It was a woman, short, middle-aged, who looked pretty good for her age but had a smoker's voice. "Ludmilla," she said, reaching out her hand. "Sergey," I replied. "Have you been here long, Sergey?" "I just moved in today." "And you?" "All my life. I'm not going anywhere from here. The bureaucrats think they can just throw us out of here easily. They promise new apartments, but in reality, they'll give you a bunk in a dormitory, if you're lucky." Ludmilla started talking. "But it's not that simple. I'd rather live here, even if that crack runs right across my apartment." "Are there a lot of people living here?" I asked out of politeness. "No, just me and Boris Anatolyevich. He used to serve in the Navy. They gave him this apartment for his years of service. Then his daughter and her family died in an accident. So now he's here alone. He stayed on the 5th floor, living there." We talked for a couple more minutes, until someone appeared from the darkness of the courtyard. Another silhouette. His posture was straight and his step was firm, but a limp in one leg and heavy breathing gave away his old age. "Meet Sergey. This is Boris Anatolyevich." Ludmilla nodded toward the silhouette. The person stepped into the light. It was an elderly man with gray hair and a mustache. I reached out my hand to him, but he didn't respond. His eyes betrayed anxiety. He was clearly worried about something, but I didn't ask. "Don't open the door at night," the old man said sternly. "The door?" I asked again. The old man didn't answer and stayed silent. He hurried up the stairs. Ludmilla and I exchanged glances. There were no answers, so after a while, we each went home. I don't know why, but the request about the doors left me a bit puzzled. At night, I locked the iron door with all the bolts, as well as the door leading to my room, the latter with a small latch. I couldn't fall asleep for a long time. All sorts of thoughts kept running through my head. It was the effect of being in a new place, and I couldn't get the old man out of my mind either. Probably just senility, I thought, and calmed down. In the middle of the night, a loud crash from the apartment above woke me up. It sounded like something heavy was being dragged across the floor up there. Then there were heavy footsteps. Another loud crash. And the last straw was something glass shattering on the floor. I got out of bed and tapped the radiator with my watch strap. The noise stopped. The rest of the night passed quietly. In the morning, before heading to the institute, I ran into Ludmila near the entrance and politely asked her whose apartment was above mine. She smiled and replied, "Boris Anatolyevich's. The apartment is pure madness, the final stage. He moves things around." I thought to myself, smiled at Ludmila, and went off to my classes. The day went by as usual. After classes, I dropped by to see Leka, met Liza, and spent time at his place until evening. I was heading home late, under the streetlights, and once again there was a silhouette standing near the entrance. "How was your day, Ludmila?" I smiled at my neighbor. She didn't answer, just looked at me with a frightened expression. "Did something happen?" I asked. "Serioza, I don't know." Her voice was trembling. Stammering with fear, she went on. "I just got back from work, was standing here smoking, and then suddenly I looked up at my window, and the light was on." She swallowed and exhaled. "And then, just like that, it turned off. Maybe there's someone in there? Come on now." I smiled. "That house is older than the two of us put together. That's why the wiring acts up. Do you want me to go in and check? If it's not too much trouble, Serioza," she said, a little calmer now, and handed me the keys. How I cursed myself for that. But it was too late to back out. I had a pepper spray with me, which gave me a bit of confidence. Ludmila's apartment door was closed. With a trembling hand, I opened the door and quickly turned on the light in the hallway. No one. I checked the kitchen, then the living room and the bedroom. Empty. I didn't feel like going back downstairs again, so I decided to call out to Ludmila through the window. She looked up happily and came into the building. She offered to have some tea and hang out at her place, but I politely declined and wandered back to my room. About an hour passed. I was sitting at my laptop watching a TV series. The window was wide open, so I could hear everything happening outside. Whether it was the voices of passing drunks or the distant sounds of cars driving by. Suddenly, I heard a scream. A woman's scream. I jumped up from my seat and looked out the window. No one. Another scream. Now I realized the screams were coming from our building. Everything clicked in my head. I started shaking. My whole body felt like it became one big block of ice for a moment, and then that warm, raining terror gripped me again. The only one who could be screaming was Ludmila, I thought. But who could hurt her? Her husband? But does she even have one? She's 40 and alone. Maybe an ex-husband? But what if she didn't open the door? Then where? I froze for a second. My eyes opened so wide, it felt like they were about to pop out. My breath stopped. I hadn't checked the bathroom. The thought crashed into my brain and left its mark there. The stupor faded, and I grabbed my phone and hid behind the curtain so I could see who came out of the building, in case I needed to identify the criminal at the police station. The dispatcher said that a unit was already on its way and would be there soon. The police van arrived in 10 minutes. During that time, no one left the building. 3 police officers ran into the building, while one stayed outside to wait. I waved to him and told him my apartment number so they could take my statement. There was a knock at the door. It was 2 detectives. They wrote down everything I told them and then invited me into the apartment. Ludmila's body was lying in the bathroom. A trail of blood stretched from the bathroom to the kitchen window. She probably tried to call for help, or tried to escape. They couldn't determine the cause of death on the spot. There wasn't a single wound. Blood was just pouring from her mouth, and her fingernails were broken, as if she'd fought with someone before she died. According to the police, they had to break open the door, which means the perpetrator had access to the apartment. The investigators' assumption is that the killer left the building through the attic and exited through another door, which leads toward the forest and is on the opposite side of the house from my window. Spending the night alone was unbearable and hard. I called Leka and asked him to come over. Leka was reluctant, but he came. Liza was spending the night at her own place today, so nothing was keeping him. By the way, I didn't tell the police about the senile old man upstairs. What's the point? They'll start interrogating him, and he'll just move his nightstand around in front of them, I thought. The night went by just like always. Around 4 o'clock, I heard a familiar crash and a very faint voice. Then there was another bang. Something glass hit the wall, and there were loud footsteps, as if the old man had started jumping in place. 5 minutes later, everything went quiet, and I fell asleep. In the morning, Leka shared his impressions after spending the night. Not only did you make me sleep on the floor, I couldn't fall asleep for half the night because of it, he said. And on top of that, some idiot kept waking me up in the middle of the night by jumping around. You heard it too? I smiled. That's my neighbor, upstairs, the senile old man. Neighbor upstairs? So you have a crazy old man living here? And you made me come over in the middle of the night and climb up that dark staircase? What if he was the one who killed the woman? And I shuddered. Thoughts started creeping into my head about how he comes down to her, opens the door, hides in the bathroom, and waits until the defenseless woman is home alone and decides to take a shower after a long day at work. That's enough, I said. He can barely breathe, let alone commit a murder. The day flew by quickly. There were only 2 classes, so I got home early. Ludmila's brother had come to her apartment. I met him on the landing and asked him about Ludmila's family. He told me that she never had a family, not now and not ever. She just wasn't lucky in life. As for him, he lives in another city and only came here for his sister's funeral. I spent the rest of the day at home. I watched a TV series. I went to bed early. I was in a bad mood. At night, I was woken up again by noise from upstairs. This time, the jumping was more frequent and harder, as if they were trying to break through the floor with their feet. Somehow, I managed to fall asleep. I got up very early. Leka's words kept running through my mind. Could the old man really be capable of something like that? In the end, I decided to call the police. The squad arrived an hour later. They scolded me for not telling them about all the residents in the house right away. They even threatened me with probation when I told them about the old man and my suspicions. The investigator decided to question the old man immediately. They told me to go with them as a witness. They knocked on the door for a long time. Boris didn't open up. Then the investigator decided to break down the door. Luckily, it was made of wood. Behind the door was a well-kept apartment. Portraits of Boris Anatolievich and his family hung on the wall. But the old man himself was nowhere to be found. The bedroom door was closed. The investigator knocked. Silence. Then he ordered the officer to break down that door too. The last barrier came off its hinges, and we entered the room. The pale, bald, and thin body of Boris Anatolievich was sitting in an armchair in front of a huge mirror. All around lay his gray hair, which had either been torn out by him or by someone else. From his head, maybe he tore it out himself, and shards of something glassy, smeared with blood. The old man's eyes were open and staring at the reflection of the door in the mirror. He was looking straight at us. The investigator called an ambulance, and the old man was taken away. I stayed home. I didn't go to university. Lyoka called, but he didn't pick up. It felt lonely and creepy. At night, I locked all the doors and windows, went to bed with a lamp on, and somehow managed to fall asleep. Dawn was breaking. I opened my eyes, stared at the ceiling, and was lost in thought when suddenly there was a crash from above, jumping, and quick footsteps running across the apartment. Now they're doing morning jogs, I thought to myself. It took me a moment to realize what was happening. A couple of seconds. I jumped out of bed and dialed the police. Time dragged on endlessly. The noise died down, and I heard a police car rush up to the building. They searched the apartment. No one. I grabbed my phone number, laptop, money, and passport. The police officer agreed to stay with me until I left, so I got dressed very quickly. I was so terrified that I even forgot where I'd thrown my phone, so I had to call it from the landline, which I had never used before that moment. On the way to Lyoka's place, the investigator told me the results of my grandfather's autopsy. Turns out, he had been dead for at least 3 days already. So, he was killed on the day he told us about the doors. I went over to Lyoka's place and stayed there until evening, while he was at the university. When he got home, we decided to take 3 of our friends with us and go pick up the rest of my things from the apartment. The streetlights started coming on as we were approaching the building. It was a bad idea to go there in the evening. As we got closer to the building, I glanced up at my windows. The light turned on for a moment and then went out. I almost fainted. I don't even remember how we got back home. All I remember is yelling at everyone to get away from that building. Now I'm living at Lyoka's place. I'm just waiting for the building to be demolished. And recently, I found a missed call on my phone. It was from the landline in my old apartment. I threw out the SIM card along with my phone. It's not my problem anymore.